welcome to a little yarn on the lake today with me, Helene, here at Cabin Fever Crochet for what may be one of our last yarn on the lake days for this year, as lake season comes to a close at the end of the month already. So I wanted to share this absolutely beautiful early fall day with you and show you what I have been up to lately. Well, one of the things anyway has been my quest to stash bust, and in the process of rearranging everything, going through my yarn, I decided to work through, come up with a few different ideas and projects of what I could do to just bust through some of that. I'm also going to insert pictures of the 3-strand that I did and the look that gives versus a 2-strand, which is more of a marled look rather than having multi-combinations of color when you're using more strands of yarn together. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you are using thicker yarn, say, well, if you're using 3 strands of a number 4 weight, that is going to yield a thicker overall piece of yarn equal to more of a bulky type of yarn, then I suggest going with more basic stitches like double crochet, half double crochet, V-stitch, and avoid stitches like posts and clusters for the thicker, because it's going to create more of a stiff fabric and it's going to be super duper bulky too and wind up being really heavy. If you do want to try using, say for example, post stitches, then I highly recommend going up yet another 1, 2, or 3 hook sizes from where you started. Depending on your tension, you'll just have to play around with that. So for my 3-strand of number 4, I went with a USN 9mm hook. So you could go up from there to maybe like a 10 to 12mm hook and try that. It's just really going to vary. And I did it with 2 strands, 3 strands. If you want, you can go up to 4 strands, but keep in mind, the more strands you have, the easier it is to drop a loop, drop one of those strands as you're crocheting, and then you wind up with a dropped loop. It is fixable, and I do have a video when I reviewed the Red Heart It's a Wrap rainbow yarn and how I did the repairs on when I drop a strand and it creates a drop loop. So I'll leave the link for that below, and anything else that's related. And of course, as always, if I'm wearing something crochet. And so yeah, you can go with however many strands you want. The thicker it is, the bulkier, of course, the harder it's a little bit it's going to be to work with, but that depends on how much you enjoy bulky yarn or how easy it is for you to crochet with that. Or some super fine weight yarn, maybe not your favorite thing to work with, or you have a little trouble with just a super skinny strand, you could put 2, 3, or 4 of those together. And again, back to crocheting with it, you just have to take a little bit more time and be careful to make sure that you catch all of your strands every time you do a yarn over and then draw it through your working piece. And so just visually have to pay a little bit more attention to that. But I think this could be worked in such a variety of projects. And to share with you a few of my other ideas, you could make a lovely bag and a few strands of lighter weight yarn so it isn't overly thick or heavy. A really great chunky scarf, a fun trivet or rug in various shapes, circular, rectangular. Chair cushions would be awesome. Placemats, pet bowl mat, or a bath mat in a wonderfully soft absorbent cotton. And of course, blankets, afghans, and throws. Here is a swatch of the yarn I'm about to show you in the 2-strand gradient. I worked this up at home using some of the cakes I brought to the lake and other cakes of the same brand that I had already wound, just to give you that visual. So as I explain, hopefully it'll make more sense. In this swatch, as you can see, I did change colors after every 2 rows. Gives a really nice look. And another nice but different look is with my blanket. You'll see in a little bit that sometimes I changed at the beginning or end of a row, sometimes in the middle, and other times everywhere in between. It just depends how it landed and when I ran out of that color. I suggest if you do want to have some type of planning in the order of how your color plays out, then once you have enough cakes in front of you to where they can be arranged how they're pleasing to your eye, then number them 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, so that whenever you get to your project or carry on with it, you will know the idea that you had in mind, which you can always change at any time. And optionally, if you have a digital scale, postal scale, scale for weighing packages, it's small, it's square, and it has a nice flat surface. So if you want to get technical, you have enough yarn that is the same amount of each, and you combine those and say, like what I did, for example, I'll pull up this one that has 2 strands together, and maybe I have some of more, not enough of the other, but I want them to try to be as equal as possible. Hope this is making sense, that you can then take your 2 or 3 or however many strands together and wind them, and then before you transition to the next color, you can weigh how much you've used. And so that way, as you get close to the size of your other cake or even ball, you don't have to do this. I did this in a ball winder, but you can certainly do this by hand. And I have a couple. I just wound up doing them all in a ball, and that worked out just fine too. So when it starts to grow to about the same size, then you can weigh your next one to see if you're getting close or not and stop there. And how you combine your yarn to create your own gradient will vary depending on how much yarn you have of one color versus others. If you're working with scrap yarns, partial skeins, and smaller balls versus full sizes of skeins. So if you have a bunch of skeins you haven't touched yet and you want to do a stash busting project, then that gives you a little more flexibility as far as using equal amounts of each as you do your transition. And also if you're working with 2, 3, or 4 strands of yarn, which of course 2 strands, you only have 2 colors to work with, so 3 and 4 is going to give you more versatility there. So a couple of ways that I did this, and this is all from Lion Brand Jeans yarn, which has been discontinued, and I had about 10 different skeins, and there were various colors, and not necessarily that all would go together on their own. Some I had 3, some I had 1, and a little bit in between. And another tip is that when you are crocheting with it, if you keep a little more tension on the yarn that's coming off your ball or cake, that certainly helps when you grab the hook around it. Just, you don't want to over tighten when you're crocheting, but once you get that pulled through, and you can let the yarn relax a little bit so that your project doesn't wind up being overly tight or stiff. So here's the one I did with 2, and then I'm going to show you one I did with 3 strands together, which makes more of a bulky yarn, and then a picture I'll insert a project I just finished of a blanket, and I will be coming up with tutorials for these soon as well as part of my stash busting series. You can do this to where you have a true gradient, that you have more of a smoother transition from one color to the next like I'm going to show you up first in 2 different color combinations that I did. Or you can just do like a patchwork and go random and just mix different colors, 2, 3, or whatever that you like together from whatever kind of stash that you have. However, it doesn't have to be the exact same brand, but I do recommend using the same type of fiber and the same weight or close to it. And it doesn't have to be exact same weight, because I did that on the blanket, and I used 3 or 4 different brands, all acrylic, little bit varying weights, and some were a little more densely spun and some were a little bit loosely, but combining them all together worked out beautiful, nice and uniform, because I think of the mix of all of those. And you can do this with your stash as you're working through projects and put cakes together. So you don't have to just use it all up now. If you want to finish a project now, which is what I did, then yes, just go for what you have in your stash, if it's enough to make whatever it is that you want out of it. Or if you want to, say, make a really large blanket and have that as a work in progress that you add to it over time as you use up some of your yarn, and then you have enough leftover stash to where you can combine the strands and make another cake, and then you add that to your project until it's gotten to the size that you want. All right, so back to this. So for having a more of a gradual transition, I took all my yarn to see exactly how much I had, and the colors that I had the most of, I tried to be the one that got carried through from the first to second and third, and then I would transition from there, and I'll show you what I mean. So I started with the red and the brown, and then I actually did weigh it to see. I was curious. So that goes pretty far in here. Okay, and then as you can see, I pulled the red, and then I transitioned to the blue, this turquoise color, and I weighed it, and it was pretty close to the same. And then next up, I transitioned from the blue back to the brown again, because I had almost the same amount of the brown, and then the blue into the khaki. So that's one set. All right, so now on the blues that I did, I started with the darkest indigo, and then the medium. And then on the second cake, I did the medium blue and the bleached denim light blue. And then I again pulled the medium and I added the khaki. What I did with my 3 strands is that I pulled 3 different colors together. They can be coordinating, they can be contrasting. You can mix in one that's variegated or mottled or marled already, and that gives an even more beautiful appearance and adds more color to it. Now, say for example, I'm working along and I have the 2, and okay, now I've run out of the red. So then I just pull another color that I like and I tie that in, and then I just keep working. So say now this is purple, and then with the next segment, after I've run out of one or all colors, I will pick 1 or 2, or sometimes I might say, like here we transitioned with 1, or maybe the next time I might transition with 2 colors. If I have a little bit left of this and none of that, I'll bring 2 other colors in. And even if you have a little bit left for just a small section or another row, a half a row, 2 rows, it really does work giving it that transition. And some colors I maybe did not have on that blanket the exact blue or the exact brown or purple. I had another purple, a darker or a medium or somewhere in that range. I would bring that in as my transition piece if I ran out of another. It's not an exact subtle transition of color, because you can see the pops of color in there, which to me, it was very fun and beautiful. And I started out kind of wanting it to be a little bit of the same theme, similar colors, but I could see early on I just did not have enough. So I had to improvise and make work with what I have, and I absolutely love it. It is so thick and cushy and cozy and wonderful and has wonderful weight to it. And I'll get into that more when I do a demo for that and then show you how I did the border, but it's really easy. It worked up unbelievably fast. I worked on that in the evenings. I finished it in a week. The main thing I found to get a gradient transition, whether you want it to be more subtle, slower, and smooth, or have more bolder, quicker changes, was to have at least one color that you can carry through onto the next section, and then within that next section, pull one color there to carry through over to the next, and so on. As shown here in my 3-strand blanket that I made up of all those different number 4 medium weight yarns. You can also see that each section doesn't necessarily have the same number of rows. Some might have 1 or 2, some 4, some 7. Just whatever yarn I had is what I used. So anyway, that is what I wanted to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed it. I really hope it made sense. I've had a sinus infection. My head is still a little bit in a fog. My clarity is coming back. I've never had a sinus infection before this, and I've heard how miserable they are, and yeah, it's just really hard to concentrate and think, which was another reason you haven't seen me in a little while, but I am getting back in action. I've missed you all and just wanted to come here and spend a few with you. So please take good care. I hope you are having a lovely day and doing well. And I hope to see you again next time for more yarny fun together. All right, until then, take care everybody, and I'll see you soon. Okay, bye for now.